Welcome to Murder and Everything Else. My name is Joy.
And my name is Cheryl. Joy and I are two very old friends who love to talk about murder and everything else.
Cheryl, I just had to tell you that 2 weeks ago, I went and got a temporary crown put on. I'm supposed to go back next week and they're supposed to put the crown on because, they have to have made at a lab and all that stuff. Anyway, today I realized that I have a giant hole in the temporary crown. So, and I can stick my tongue in the giant hole and touch.
That's what he said.
Whatever is left of the tooth that's in there. So,
oh my God.
Yeah. So the soonest they can get me in is Thursday. So I have to wait 3 days to go in and have it fixed. Meanwhile, I can't really chew anything on that side because I don't want to compromise the tooth anymore. Right.
Right. Yeah. You're going to get food in there and all kinds of fun
why
stuff.
I'm so annoyed. Why can't they just see me today? Why couldn't they squeeze me in for 10 minutes? They've already got the impression. They've already got the actual crown. All it involves is popping this off and popping the other one on.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that you should probably look. Oh, I just said, Joy has told me that I say too much. So I apologize. I'm going to be really self-conscious. But I have always had dentists, or I've had one for 20 something years in California. And then the one I have here, they've always fit me in right away because it is an emergency. I mean, they should really be fitting. I would look for a new dentist, by the way, after you get this crown straightened out.
I'm irritated. I'm hoping that it doesn't deteriorate over the next 3 days before I can get in because, I don't want to have what your tooth looks like before they put a crown. It's like this jagged, they file it down to this jagged little point. I mean, I don't want to be walking around looking like a golem from Lord of the
Rings. Where is it? Where is it in your mouth? In the front?
No, it's a molar.
Oh, yeah. It should be fine. Just try not to eat on that side. But still, that's very unusual. My dentist has always fit me in right away if something's fallen off because it should only take
It's a good thing I've been eating a lot of canned veggie hot dogs and instant noodles because that's nice and squishy.
Okay, because they won't make your way in. They won't make its way into your hole.
Exactly. Okay. Ooh, that's what she said. Anyway, Elena, I'm here to tell you that this can be an extra long update, shout out, intro, because last week's episode was short. It was 53 minutes. So I have done the calculations and I figure I got 7 extra minutes in this episode.
Yeah. Wait, can I just say something, Elena? I just want to say that I do not concur. I told Joy we should celebrate that victory and keep the standard of keeping it short, but she feels like we are owed now. We saved time and we did Elena time on the last one, which I was really happy about. And Joy feels like we deserve now to go extra long on this one. So I apologize because I tried to talk her out of it.
I have some updates. Last week, there was lots of dog barking during our recording, so just ignore that. Also, I've talked about it in the past that I love data. I love data analysis. If I could go to school again and find a career, I'd probably go into some kind of data analysis because I really love statistics and all that stuff. But anyway, we are now up to 45 states listening to us instead of 44. So there's 5 holdout states. So we got to get those other 5 states on board.
Do we have a breakdown of the states?
Oh yeah. You want to hear a list?
Well, who's the new one? Who's the 44th?
I don't know. I just know there's 45 states. I didn't. Okay. I also don't know which are the holdouts because I didn't go through and list the ones that the 45 that are listening so that I could find out who the 5 were. That
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
I should, but anyway. And then the last thing I'm going to say is probably not really of interest to most people, but for those of you who watch the Grammys, by the time this comes out, It will have been like a week or two before, but it was last night. It appears that Kanye West and his wife, whose name is Bianca Censori, showed up. And when she took her fur coat off, she was basically naked underneath it. So for those of
Oh,
you who are curious, the Grammys is not a clothing optional program. That's your hot tub time at home or nude beach. Also, I find it misogynistic that he was fully clothed in a black t-shirt and a black pants and black boots, and she was not clothed at all. If you were cosplaying Adam and Eve, maybe you should include playing Adam too. So if you go or back and look at images of them going out and going places in the last however couple of years that they've been together or whatever, he is always fully dressed. Sometimes he looks like a street post or a lamp. And she is mostly naked, and she has continued to become more and more naked as she makes public appearances, but they're always together. And I find it really creepy and really weird because why isn't he wandering around town with his schlong hanging out? Like
right.
and I get it. Like he says she's his muse and she's the most beautiful woman on the planet, but that's to him. It's not to everybody else. Like, so
We don't want to see
clothes
it.
on. Well, put some clothes on her, and also wearing clothes does not mask your beauty. That's the
Yeah.
other
Oh,
thing is
yeah.
you can look beautiful. If you're beautiful in and out, it's going to shine through no matter what you have on. So
Well,
maybe he's also indicating that he's not beautiful. Because that's the other thing is like, why is it always her that's wandering around with no clothes on? I find it really weird and
right.
creepy.
Also, yeah, you know what? I have not been following any award shows and whatnot. I'm gonna have to look that up. But I'm a little bit surprised that he just wore a t-shirt. I'm looking at it now. I remember back in the day when the award shows, they used to dress up.
Well, he has his own line of clothing and has for some years. And literally, the only thing that he makes are like matching tracksuits.
Oh,
It's
well,
literally like sweatpants and sweatshirts that are the same color. And I don't think that they're unique or exciting. If you go on any website, everyone's wearing athleisure now that's all like neutral colors. So maybe he credits himself with having started that trend, but you can buy neutral colored sweats at any shop. It's not like it's
right.
special to him because I think his sweats are a lot more expensive than whatever you
Oh,
buy down at your local thrift store. Well, anyway, Cheryl, you got any updates?
I do have an update. So, you guys remember we talked about Alec Baldwin and the whole Rush shooting? This actually came out a few weeks ago, but I was limited on time for Elena time, so I didn't mention it last time. But Alec Baldwin, if you don't already know, has filed a lawsuit against those involved in pursuing criminal charges against him over the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins on the film set of Rust. The U.S. actor is suing the defendants, including Special Prosecutor Carrie Morrissey, that nutcase, sorry, don't come for me, but oof, and Santa Fe District Attorney Mary Carmack Altwies, probably mispronouncing that, for malicious prosecution and civil rights violations. Baldwin claims prosecutors were blinded by their desire to convict him for all the wrong reasons. In a statement, Ms. Morrissey said, "We look forward to our day in court." So that'll be interesting because you remember the case was against him was dismissed for misconduct, basically.
Yeah.
The prosecutor did not disclose all the evidence and stuff like that to the defense. It was just wrong what they did. And that Morrissey lady, wow.
Wow.
I don't know if she's still practicing or what, but she's frightening.
Anyway, I'm moving on to shout outs.
Okay.
I have a shout out today for naps. I think you've also shouted out naps in the past, but I am
You're turning over a new leaf.
Yeah, well, I am
Wow.
notoriously not a napper. I have said that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I have been rudely woken up by one of my dogs all weekend at 4 a.m. and 5 a.m. And so what I've done is I fed the dog, let her out to pee, and then brought her back in the house and then gone back to bed for an hour to catch up on some sleep because no human being should be waking up at 4 a.m. So if it wasn't for the nap, I'm not even kidding you, I'd be sitting here sleeping.
Right. No, I love naps. Naps and pockets. She's coming over to the other side from the dark side. She's getting out of the dark side.
What about you, Cheryl? You got any shout outs?
I do have a shout out, and my shout out is all right. I've noticed a couple of people in my day-to-day life. They're so fascinating to me because the reason I'm giving them a shout out is because I think it just makes them happy to have. For me, as an outsider, I'm like, man, that's got to be tiring to be that dedicated, or maybe they have OCD, especially this first person that I'm going to talk about. But when I watch her, to me, it's like, wow, that's a lot of effort. But if that makes you happy, then shout out to you. There's a woman that lives in this apartment complex. She's a little bit older. And I won't go into any more detail because if she does live in this place, I don't want anybody to know who I'm talking about. She'll know who she is. So this is an apartment complex. All right. And so there's no personal garage. Well, they do have closed garages you can rent, but it's not like it's connected to the unit. So it's basically a parking lot with, if you're a resident, then it's covered parking. It just has it's a carport, but you're parked next to, it's a parking lot with the covering. I see her out there all the time, Joy. She constantly is cleaning her car. I'm sure she's doing the inside, but she's wiping down the outside, and she's constantly sweeping that little area of the parking lot. And I find it so interesting that she takes such care in a public space where there's dirt flying all the time. I don't know if it's because it's a desert, but if you wash your car, you can't fall to pieces when you walk out the next day and it's covered in a layer of dust, because that's just the way it is here. She's constantly sweeping her little area of the parking lot. And it's not like there's a barrier that's going to prevent the dirt and leaves from the rest of the parking lot coming into her parking space. It's incredible. I see her all the time and I'm like, wow. But it must make her happy, unless it's just some crazy like OCD thing and it makes her, yeah. And then there's a young gentleman at the park that I go to, one of the parks I go to, and he has to sit in the same. So the park's pretty big, and they have different areas where there's benches covered so that you can obviously eat there, but also people can reserve it for parties and whatnot. So it's a pretty big area, but there's several of these around the park. And I've seen him eating there. And one day I went under this covered space and I was sitting at one of the benches and I was giving Callie water. And I noticed someone just kind of like loitering around and walking behind me. Didn't really look to see who it was, but when we got up to leave, because I wasn't going to hang out there, just wanted to sit and give her some water. It was him, and he was waiting for me to leave. And I'm talking this area, it's for parties and whatnot. So there's like 12 picnic benches, but he waited for me to leave so that he could have the entire space to himself. I was just like, wow. I mean, so I don't know if it's a shout out necessarily, but I just wanted to comment on it because people have their habits and their things that make them feel good, or I don't know what it is, but those are the two that I've noticed, and it makes me feel a little bit sad for them. But I guess like the lady that sweeps up and stuff, I guess it makes her happy. It's strange because they're both in public places that you have no control over this stuff, but they take meticulous care to do this one thing. I just wanted to call that out because I found it fascinating.
That is fascinating. Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was so interesting.
People have really interesting quirks. I have to say that. I have really interesting quirks too.
Yes, you do.
Like, for example, I went to go
Uh-oh.
return some stuff to the store and I ended up leaving with a pair of boots.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what she's returning, you guys. She'll walk out with a pair of boots. So if she's returning a kitchen item, she'll walk out with a pair of boots.
Anyway, guys, this week, Cheryl and we teased it, I think, in our last episode or maybe a couple episodes ago, but we're going to do an episode called Did You Know or Do You Care? We're going to talk about things that older folks maybe don't know about, or that maybe things that have changed that people aren't aware of. And what I'm going to do is I actually pulled up things that I kind of want to stump Cheryl and see if she even knows these, because
Probably not.
some of them are really, really good. And then some of them are for what my kids like to call the boomers. In other words, people who are old. It's not people from the baby boomer generation, which is basically my mother's generation was the baby boomer generation. They were the babies that were born on the tail end of World War II or during World War II. That's the baby boomer generation. However, and a lot of those people have passed on because obviously they're in their 80s or 90s.
I thought I was a boomer.
No, I just call you
I?
a boomer to mess with you. So I'm going to start with some science stuff. And that is, Cheryl, did you know that Pluto, which has long been considered our 9th planet, in 2006 was downgraded to a dwarf planet by the International Astronomical Union. So it was reclassified from a regular standard planet to a dwarf planet because of its size.
And how does that come about? How do
I
they
don't
decide
know.
why?
But
Okay, my
remember
question
when
is
you're a
why?
kid and they had all the planets like on a mobile, or they'd have
Yeah,
it in
yeah.
a classroom and they all had different colors and different sizes and they were all strategically placed.
Yeah.
So Pluto is in a distant region of our solar system that's beyond Neptune. So I think what happened was, once upon a time, we didn't have high powered apparatus like, what are those things? Telescopes that could see far away. And also, we didn't have all the rovers and things that were going to Mars and sending back all this data and videos and photographs. But now we do. And so it was determined that what we once thought was a normal sized planet was actually a very, very tiny uninhabitable planet. And so they downgraded it to a dwarf planet.
And so what does that mean as far as what does that change? So when you have this mobile now, it's not going to be on.
So instead of there being 9 planets in our solar system, or however many planets in our solar system, there's like 8 planets and a dwarf planet.
There's 8 planets. There's 8 donuts and a donut hole, basically.
Yeah, basically. So it's like probably bigger than a star and smaller than a planet.
Okay, interesting.
Right.
What did you call it? A dwarf planet?
A dwarf planet. I'm glad that the planet that got downgraded wasn't Uranus.
Oh God.
I was dying. I was dying to say that.
I know you were.
Do you have one for me?
I do. Actually, this is not for you because you're the one that told me about it. But all you fishers out there, did you know or do you care that you no longer put 2 spaces after a period when you type? Mm-hmm. It's now 1. And I cannot tell you when that happened. I only know that my dear co-host was the one that told me that. And I don't even remember how it came up. Right. But we were talking and you said, see, having children is very useful because you found out from one of your daughters, right? That they no longer do 2 spaces.
Yeah. You only put 1 space after the period at the end of a sentence. Using 2 spaces is outdated and incorrect.
So if you don't want to show your age, You need to retrain, which is, I have been in the process since you told me this, and it's been months, and it's really hard. Even texting and typing, any type of typing, right? Just putting one period to retrain yourself. But what I want to know is why.
That's
These
really
are my questions.
good.
Why do we have to change it? Why did we change it from 2 to, are we just lazy? Why did we feel that it needed to be 2 spaces before if it could always be 1? Why
Well,
wasn't it 1 before? Why have we downgraded to 1 space after a period?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if this is the reason why, but I'm gonna guess manual typewriters, where you hit the key and then the letter came up and hit,
Yeah.
and the little ribbon with ink popped up and it would hit the paper. My guess is because of the size of those metal letters and because of typewriters and the way that they were designed, that the rule was put in place when typewriters originated to leave enough space for correction, and also because the size of the letters were larger. But
Mm-hmm.
now we use computers,
Computers. Yeah.
so we no longer have to correct errors. And also, there's so many fonts that are, so you can put more words in like a document or in a sentence or in a
Mm.
line. So if you take a computer and you look at a line of text next to an old typewriter line of text, you have so many more words and letters that fit into that line. So that's going to be my guess. I don't know if
Mhm.
that's true.
Yeah, no, that's a good guess. I just want to put out a PSA, a public service announcement, that if you don't want to look old, then you need to retrain yourself to 1 space after a period. And I'm trying desperately. Have you changed it? Have you changed your typing?
No, but the only things that I don't do it in text messages. And the only typing that I do is for the outline for this podcast or for documentation for this podcast. So I still include it, but that's the only person who's reading it is you or me. So you're not going to go, hey, I think there's 2 spaces there.
That's interesting. It's anyway, I found that interesting. And there was a woman at a restaurant who was about my age, and don't ask me how this came up. Why I would tell this lady that was working at the restaurant, did you know that it's now only 1 space after a period? I don't know how it came up, Joy,
And she
but
goes,
to my
thanks, Karen.
but to my sheer delight, she did not know. And I was like, I'm doing God's work, and I'm letting everybody know that it's now 1 space after
Oh
a
my
period,
God,
not
doing
2.
God's work.
Anyway,
That's funny.
that's
Well, anyway, for all the boomers out there listening to this, you heard it here. Get rid of one of those spaces. Roaring on. My next did you know is, Cheryl, did you know that different countries teach students to count the continents differently? So when you and I were growing up, we were taught that there were 7 continents, but some countries say there are only 5 continents, and some countries combine North and South America and call them the Americas. And some
oh,
countries do not include Antarctica. Isn't that
that
fascinating?
is, well, that's weird. So how does that work? I mean,
Well,
how?
we're not all taught the same. And I love the idea. It makes sense that as Americans, we would all think that we have the same foundation of education because Americans just think that everybody thinks like them. But I love to think that everybody is taught differently. Yeah, I mean, the fact that we say there's 7 continents doesn't mean that everybody thinks there are 7 continents. I just love that, like,
You
you know,
do?
yeah, I think it's really
I find
cool.
that strange. I feel like there should be a universal bank of knowledge that everybody teaches and learns,
Yeah.
because that seems
No,
strange to
I
me.
I get it, but that's not the case. And so I find that very, very interesting.
Here,
And I don't know
here.
why I didn't know that, but I stumbled across that in the last like 3 or 4 months. I was listening to, so I, for those of you who are listening to this and maybe don't know who we are, because I know there are now people who listen to this that don't know us. I speak Spanish fluently, and I listen to different Spanish speaking podcasts as well as videos and shorts and TikTok videos. So I listen to, like, I have several that I listen to from Spain. I listen to some from Mexico. I've been listening to a lot of the Mexican president, whose name is Claudia Sheinbaum, I believe, speak in Spanish. She has very beautiful Spanish. And so I found out by listening to a podcast in Spanish. So I went and did some digging. People just learn different things in different countries, which of course makes sense. Like, why would they teach the same thing in every country? But yeah, I found that out. I just thought it was fascinating.
Oh,
Anyway,
that's interesting.
Yeah, your turn.
Okay. Did you know, or do you care, you guys? My host also told me about this. That's where I get that's where I learn everything from my host, my co-host, that it's no longer STD, sexually transmitted disease. It is now STI. So the correct term is STI and not STD. STI is sexually transmitted infection. And if Joy, would you like to grace us with more information on that? Have we crossed out STD, or now different things are categorized as STD and STI? STI.
So STI is when you have an infection. So if you go to the doctor because you had, let's say, unprotected sex and you need to get tested and they catch an infection, that's the STI. If you leave it and it becomes a disease and you start displaying disease symptoms and you go to the doctor, the one that comes most common to mind is like syphilis.
HIV versus,
or
what about HIV,
HIV? Yeah, like HIV and AIDS. So like if you are infected with HIV and become HIV positive, that's STI. But if you have full-blown AIDS, it's an STD. So an infection can be treated with, apparently with medication. And then if you get an STI, then you have to take something like an antiviral or something. I don't know. So one is an infection, one is a disease.
Got it. So interesting, though. I did not know that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, we grew up always saying STDs.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense that,
But again, if you don't want to show your age, you need to jump on the bandwagon. Make sure you're using the right acronyms.
That's right.
It's my goal in life.
That's right. Oh, I love acronyms. And actually the last.
Oh, yeah, she does, you guys.
My last, did you know, do you care, actually is about an acronym. My next, did you know, or do you care is, did you know that when my kids were little, if you were diagnosed with autism, it was autism or Asperger's. There was two. But did you know that now it's called autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, and the symptoms of Asperger's are included in ASD. So it's a wide range. ASD is the name used for a wide range of autism-like disorders, and some providers may still use the term Asperger's, but most of them should say ASD without intellectual or language impairment, and that would describe Asperger's. ASD is the catch-all term now, autism spectrum disorder, and that is the umbrella under which all different kinds of ASD, like spectrum disorders, fall.
Oh, interesting. Because I feel like before it was sort of like, I don't want to misspeak, but it's sort of like when people didn't want to say, well, their child or somebody they know has autism, it's like, no, they just have Asperger's, as if it's, you know what I mean? Not as severe, or I don't know how to word it. Or like, so what about
like high functioning or low functioning was something else that they used to always say. But now they actually address the actual, like, the list of disorders, like saying without intellectual or language impairment. They'll say, like processing disorder. They'll say things like that. So they'll actually address the specific issues that fall under the autism spectrum disorder that each individual has, because autism is such a wide ranging disorder. There's so many different nuances to it.
So what about when you say someone is on the spectrum? Is that something that's still?
Yeah, that means they fall under the autism spectrum. That means they have autism spectrum disorder. So they're on the spectrum. And then you can dig down, even like burrow down even more specifically to what their specific impairment is, whether it's like a language impairment or intellectual impairment, or maybe they have auditory impairment, or maybe they have sensory impairments, things like that.
Okay. So we can expect not to hear Asperger's anymore.
Exactly. They said that older providers may still use the term, but it's not, it's being phased out.
See, that's another one on my list. I got to try to stay current. You know how hard that is for me.
All right. What's next on your list?
Okay. This is another one that's come from my co-host. Well, because you encouraged me to listen to Smart List. Joy and I we used to love Smart List, and now we're kind of selective with which episodes we listen to. And so I hadn't listened to this one, and she encouraged me to listen to it. And I learned that UFO is now UAP. Did you guys know that? Did you know, or do you care, you guys, that it's now UAP? The term unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAP, is now used in place of unidentified flying object, UFO, by some investigators and government agencies. The term UAP is intended to be more neutral. We have lost our minds. The term UAP is intended to be more, because all I can see is gender neutral, is intended to be more neutral and encourage scientific study of unexplained phenomena. Yeah. Phenomena.
Chapel Rowan has a song called Feminamenon. I love it. I'm sorry, it's Femininomenon.
Oh, brother.
Either Feminamenon or Femininomenon, but I love it.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting. So don't say UFO if you don't want to date yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I'm not going to be able to speak in public anymore because.
And also, Cheryl and I learned about it from an episode of Smart List with Luis Elizondo. By the way, he was the former director of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And if you guys want to learn, like, have your heads blown off by the shit that's out there flying around, go listen to it, because I was shook. Those videos, like, apparently pilots and Air Force pilots and commercial pilots have seen shit in the skies that will make your eyes roll back in your head. And and they're not drunk or high. I mean, maybe they are drunk or high, but this is real shit that they're seeing, guys. So, and they've captured it. And I mean, there've been congressional hearings on this stuff. It's fascinating. Anyway, while Cheryl gets the gigglies, I'm going to roll on to this is a big one for me. And I am going to actually ask Cheryl if she knows what these initials are for. But
no, I can tell you right now, no.
I got to tell you that I'm sure there are those of you out there who've heard LGBTQ or LGBTQIA. I ran across one, and it's LGBTQQIP2SAA. And I was going to ask you, Cheryl, do you know what LGBTQQIP2SA stands for?
I'll get back to you next week after I look it up.
Well,
what in the actual hell?
LGBTQIA+ is the one that most people throw out there. And it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer, questioning, and asexual. But LGBTQQIP2SA is lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, pansexual, two-spirited, and asexual. So I not kidding you. I had to look up two-spirited because
Oh, that was what I was going to ask. I was like,
never
what was that
even
second to the last
heard
one?
of two-spirit. So did you know that there are 5 genders of Native Americans, and they are female, male, two-spirit female, two-spirit male, and transgender? And two-spirit is a contemporary pan-Indian umbrella term used by some indigenous North Americans to describe Native people who fulfill a traditional third gender social role in their communities. And I was so fascinated by that because I think that we a lot of times don't think about the cultures that are indigenous to the land that we live in. We're researching this episode. I learned something new about the country I live in that I didn't even know about. I'm going to have to ask my kids about two-spirited.
I'm sure they know. I bet you
Well,
anything they know.
I'm sure they know. They know everything.
That's very interesting.
Anyway, your turn.
Okay. Did you know or do you care that air drying your hair can cause more damage than blow drying it? Did you know that?
You mean just letting it
Air.
drip dry?
Yeah. So I was watching something.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was watching or reading something, and I don't remember what the topic was, but the girl was like, well, air drying is not good for your hair anyway. And then I thought, what? I've always thought that using heat on your hair was worse than not. When I looked into it further, oh God, I'm not gonna bore you guys with the construction of a hair strand and the follicle and all that jazz. What I can determine, and I encourage you to look it up if you can find the accurate information online, because I just went on a rant about that before we started recording with Joy. That I went on a rant with her about just looking up information now. I don't know what you can trust and what you can't, but I guess you're supposed, so depending on what site you find. One place I read that, well, you should let your hair air dry, naturally air dry, about 80%. And then you can dry it with a blow dryer, but you shouldn't use it on high and blah, blah, blah. I'll just tell you guys that I air dry my hair because I'm too lazy to blow dry it. And only if I'm cold, which is very rare, do I blow dry it. But I had never heard that until recently. I always thought air drying just naturally, because it said something about the weight of your hair and it can break it off when it's wet more than if you dry it. But, I think you have to probably dry it on a certain setting and whatnot. It was too much for my little brain. So I'm like, I'm going to do what I want. That's what I walk away with that. I walk away from that. But I found it fascinating that some hairstylists are saying it's more damaging to your hair to air dry it. But you guys look it up and you decide for yourselves.
Yep. Talk amongst yourselves, decide for yourselves. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on. This one is, you're going to laugh, but I had to include this. Do you know, or do you care to know what BDSM stands for?
Isn't it BDSM? It's bondage, something to do with bondage and dominatrix and sadism, right?
Yeah, you got 2 of them. But listen,
dominatrix.
So if you write it out, BDSM, so it stands for bondage and discipline, BD. Then the 2 letters in the middle are DS, dominance and submission. And then the last 2 letters, remember it's only 4 letters, is SM, sadism and masochism or sadomasochism. Isn't that fascinating? I didn't know that. I thought it was just BDSM and there was one word for each one. I didn't realize it was BD, DS, SM.
Oh, I thought that's what you said. No, you said
BDSM, so it's only 4 letters, but it stands for bondage and discipline, which is the B and D, dominance and submission, which are the 2 middle letters D and S, and then sadism and masochism for the S and the M at the end. So it's 4 letters, but it's being used for 6 words. So anyway, what's the next one you've got for us, Cheryl?
I'm throwing this one in because I think even on the last episode, I talked about how I'm obsessed with Michael Jackson right now. Joy, don't ask me why. The guy has been gone since 2009, and he has popped up in my psyche for the last 2 or 3 weeks. It is the most bizarre thing, and I cannot explain it. It's the weirdest thing. But in the rabbit hole that I've gone down, um, I found that, and you're gonna find conflicting things on the internet.
Mama Makusa. Sorry. I'll stop.
Elena, we're sorry. We're dragging this out much longer than it needs to be. But I learned he is a black belt. The guy is so talented. He is a black belt in what I found was Kung Fu. Now, he was given a 5th degree black belt for karate. It was an honorary black belt. Don't write in and say it was an honorary one. I know that.
No, please write in. Nobody writes in, so please.
Oh yeah, you're right. That's right. I'm sorry. What am I saying? I've lost my mind. No, but don't write in and tell me it was an honorary one, because I know that. I know that the one that he was given for karate was an honorary one, but he, according to some sources that I've read, and like I said earlier, I don't know what to believe anymore with what I find online. But I did read that his father, when the Jackson 5 were young and they were really popular, their father enrolled them because he wanted them to be able to protect themselves. But if you look at Michael Jackson's his dancing, there are elements that are kind of martial arts-esque. So I did see that he was a black belt in Kung Fu, which I found so fascinating. He also is an artist. Did you know that? He can draw and paint. I found some special where they showed some of his stuff. And I'm not talking stick figures. I'm talking like really, like there was yeah. Because that would be what, if you were to look in my repertoire of artistry, it would be stick figures. But he actually could really draw and paint. Anyway, I found that fascinating. If anybody cares.
That is fascinaing.
Again, I don't know what to believe though.
I don't know if you ever like went to museums and looked at art or whatever, but like I had the opportunity to go to like all of the like huge, museums and even small museums in Europe. So I went to all of them, and multiple times. I've been to the Louvre like 5 or 6 times. I've been to the Prado 5 or 6 times. I've been to all those museums where they have the mummies in London and the British Museum of History.
I saw that one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, I love looking at art. I love art. I think it's fascinating. I don't know a lot about it. I studied art history in college. You have to take a class, and I went and saw the different, masters and all of their like, amazing works of art when I was in Europe. I've been to Greece. I've been to, Italy. I've been all over. I've been to Rome. I've been to the Sistine Chapel, whatever. I remember reading an article about how after George W. Bush left the White House, he became an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So of course in my head, I'm thinking about like, these amazing, works of art, like, Van Gogh and Rembrandt and, whatever, all these famous Picasso and Matisse. And I looked it up, and I'm not kidding you. And I'm not an artist, so I'm not throwing shade on people who paint and who are artists. But I swear to you, Cheryl, it's like it's like he's painting Cookie Monster. It's not. It's like, he likes to paint dogs, and I'm like, every dog he paints, I swear, maybe I was looking at someone else's paintings, but I was just like, it's like he's painting Oscar and Cookie Monster and Grover and the dog that plays the piano and the Muppets. They all look like that. So when you said he was an artist, I'm like, anyone can
I
be an
can see.
artist, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Even you and
No.
I could paint Grover or Cookie Monster. It's like a furry
Oh,
head
so
with a
funny.
red beady eyes. So there.
Oh God, that's hilarious. No, I just have to tell you, I was so fascinated because he was so talented. I mean, all he could have been doled out just the dance, songwriting, and singing ability, and that would have been more than fair to give to one person. But he had all these other talents, which I thought was fascinating. Oh, that's so funny.
Here we go, Cheryl. This is my next Did You Know?
Okay.
And this is going to be a little bit of a lesson for some people, but I wanted to talk about this, especially now, because I feel like, a lot of this kind of stuff has come under fire lately, but I feel like it's really important, especially for maybe like the people in our listening demographic or people a little older. I wanted to talk about the difference between pansexual and cisgender. Pansexual means someone is attracted to people of all genders, regardless of their gender identity, while cisgender refers to a person whose gender identity matches the sex they were assigned at birth, essentially meaning they identify as the same gender they were assigned at birth. Let's just break it down. Pan comes from the Greek word meaning all. A pansexual person could be attracted to cisgender men, cisgender women, transgender individuals, non-binary people, etc. Gender is not a factor in attraction for a pansexual person. They're just attracted to everyone. Cisgender. Cis also comes from the Latin meaning on the same side as. So a cisgender woman is someone assigned female at birth who identifies as a woman. Opposite of cisgender is transgender, where someone's gender identity differs from their assigned sex at birth. I don't know if you knew that, but I wanted to spell it out. So if somebody says to you that they're pansexual, it means they are attracted to everyone.
How is pan different from bi?
So bi means that they're only attracted to men or women.
What else?
Sorry, men and women. Whereas pansexual refers to all genders. It refers to men, it refers to women, it refers to transgender individuals and non-binary.
Okay, I got it. Okay. I guess I was like, is this a trick question? What? Okay, got it. Okay.
All right. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is because pansexual people can also be attracted to non-binary people, and a lot of times people get confused about binary, non-binary, and they don't understand things like neutrality and gender neutrality. So I wanted to talk about gender neutral terms for people. So gender neutral people will go by traditionally they, them, or theirs. That's a non-gender specific pronoun that refers to an unknown or unspecified gender. Then there's gender queer, which is an umbrella term for people who don't identify as male or female. And then there's gender non-conforming, which is a term used to describe people whose gender identity falls outside of the male, female gender binary.
Woo.
So
that's a lot. I'm going to have to study that.
But hey, you know what? You heard it here. On the tail end of that, I just want to tell you that this summer, we got an opportunity to use all gender bathrooms, which was so fun. And I just have to tell you about a company I once worked for. Do you remember that show, Ally McBeal?
Uh-huh.
That was the first introduction. And it was so funny because, they had all gender bathrooms, right? So like you could be peeing in a stall right next to your boss, who could be a boy or a girl or whatever, transgender person, non-binary person, whatever, pansexual person. But I remember it made waves because people were like, gross, I am not going to be taking a dump in a stall next to somebody who's of the other sex. And this summer we got to use an all gender bathroom, but I worked for this company once and they had a suggestion box and they would always ask for suggestions. And it was a job that I don't want to use the term dead end job, but it kind of It kind of was a dead-end job. Or in other words, it was like a job where I definitely didn't see a future, like as in my future was not going to include working at this job for very long. And so I used to always disguise my handwriting, right? That my one suggestion every month was having all gender bathrooms, and then I would fold it up in a little triangle and I'd stick it in there. And every month I'd go to the company meeting with the hopes that they would read my suggestion. At the time the boss would open up my paper, I would watch him crumple it up and stick it in his pocket so he would never read it. And I would get so disappointed because I also was hoping that he would say, could the person who keeps putting the suggestion to have all gender bathrooms to please stop putting it in the suggestion box, because at least then I would know that they were like recognizing my suggestion.
What? I'm surprised you didn't call him out on like what's that? Why aren't you reading that one? What's
Well,
that
there
in your
was at
pocket?
least 20 to 25 people at the meeting, so I think he just didn't want to have to go down that road and have that conversation. Anyway, if that guy's out there, his name is Scott, is listening to this podcast in some weird way.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Scott. I hope that you guys embraced my all gender. And I'm sure that he realized when I quit working at this dead end job.
Oh, it was.
That suggestion stopped coming into the suggestion box.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
That is hilarious.
How about you, Cheryl? You got any more do you knows?
No, I think you took the cake on your last one.
Well, that was not my last one.
Oh, okay.
One more.
Okay.
And Cheryl always likes to give me a hard time because I love using acronyms like TTYL, LOL, or BRB when we're texting.
Okay, let me just say something in my defense. Those are standard. People know LOL and BRB. Yep. Let me tell you guys something. She sends me the most random letters that I know that it's not me, because I'll ask you sometimes, like, am I supposed to know this? Really?
Yeah, like one that I sent her, it's not so out there, was SAHM. And she's like, what is SAHM? And I said, it's stay at home mom. I was like, come on now. That's
no. One of them was about the thrift store. And I can't remember what it was, but I was like, you made that one up. She just took that's what an acronym is, but Joy could take the first letter from a sentence and just use an acronym.
I got to tell you,
to know what it is.
My new favorite one, Cheryl, and I'm going to start using it all the time, but I don't know if you've heard it. It's FAFO. Have you heard this?
Fuck around and find out.
I can't believe you know it. I know. My hat's off to you. Well, that's
why I know.
It's fuck around and find out.
Because I've watched like shorts, TikToks, whatever it was, where on these road rage. That's how I learned. It was these road rage videos where this woman thought that it was a good idea to smack this guy, and he just basically did a wrestling move where he picked her up and slammed her on the pavement, and somebody wrote, I know she was fine, you guys. I'm not heartless, but she was out of her mind. Okay. And because she was fighting with the female driver, and then the guy came out to kind of calm it down, and then she thought she would just haul off and hit him in the face. And somebody put FAFO, and I looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Fuck around and find out. So I'm so proud. I knew
I'm so proud of you for knowing that acronym, because it's my new favorite acronym, and I'm going to use it all the time.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Anyway, Guys, if you are not listening to this podcast, it is a huge, huge fucking crime. Because you could be
Huge.
learning all kinds of new stuff. But you know what else is a crime?
What's that, Joy?
We are out of time.
That is a crime. Well, thank you for listening, everyone, and don't complicate your day. All creativity, commentary, and opinions in this podcast belong to Cheryl and Joy. Music composed and mixed by Gabe McKeon. Logo and merch managed by Cheryl Yamaguchi. Podcast editing, advertising, and social media managed by Joy McKeon. Legal representation provided by John Bojezic. Please like, subscribe, follow, and listen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Audible.com, Amazon Music, YouTube, and iHeartRadio. And remember, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok, or you can email us at murderandeverythingelse@gmail.com.
Bye, fishes.